There are few people in the 20th century who provided more inspirational material for comedy on British television than David Croft. His comedies, particularly those co-written with Jimmy Perry, were inspired by personal experience. In World War II, Croft was an ARP warden and Perry was in the Home Guard, which led to Dad's army. After that, both of them served in the Royal Artillery in the Far East, with Perry running the concert party, hence it ain't half hot mum. After the war, Perry worked at Butlins holiday camp as a redcoat, hence Heidi High. You can pretty much guarantee if they penned it, Croft or one of his collaborators had some form of experience of it. And then we have Croft's final contribution as a producer, Oh Dr. Beeching, made for BBC One between 1995 and 97. Co-writer Richard Spendlove worked for British Railways for 35 years, being appointed relief station master at Cambridge in 1963 and working through the Beeching years until 1989. So you can sort of see the inspiration and the benefit of real-life experience there. So, what was the show all about? Spoiler alert, you've been warned. In 1963, the rural backwater station of Hatley, which isn't given a specific county, but deducing from the characters' accents, it's easy to say somewhere in the north of England, has a very casual way of doing things. Senior porter and acting station master Jack Skinner, played by Paul Shane, works alongside his wife, buffet manageress May, played by Julia Deakin, booking office clerk Ethel Schumann, played by Sue Pollard, and her dim-witted son Wilfred, played by Paul Aspin, amongst a selection of other characters we'll get to. But there's going to be a few shake-ups as the station is given a new station master, the stern and well-spoken Cecil Parkin, played by Geoffrey Holland. Parkin doesn't approve of their laid-back methods and becomes determined to make his station the pride of the line. But guess which infamous report was published on his first day? So the show follows the adventures and mishaps of the station staff in their bid to quietly skirt around the wielding of Beeching's axe, while coping with British Railways dealing with a general downturn in traffic due to road competition, and the staff having their own little side ventures, like taking bets, mending clocks, selling groceries, hairdressing, basically anything that can be done on the side to help them make ends meet. So will these hidden activities remain a secret from Mr. Parkin and from Dr. Beeching? And speaking of secrets, can Mr. Parkin and Jack's wife keep their own little secret from the rest of the staff? As a comedy, Oh Dr. Beeching really didn't set the world on fire. In fact, it was more like damp kindling set to canned laughter. Seriously, you can tell in some places they use the same laugh tracks over and over again. Tara Daniels, who played one of the recurring side characters in the show, said in an interview for the Tuesday Club with Aidan O'Rourke that the cast and crew spent 4 weeks shooting on location and the rest was done in a studio in front of a live audience. But with some of the laugh tracks being used on repeat, it's hard to tell that the audience was live sometimes. The show had recurring themes from week to week, such as Jack getting protective of his wife, Percy the guard flirting with any woman he sees but principally coming back to the widowed Ethel when no one else is around, Wilfred being the underappreciated butt of all the dirty work like your average Tesco's employee while showing a level of intelligence that makes Private Pike look like Stephen Hawking, and May apparently knowing all the men with high connections. But some themes ended before they really had a chance to develop. One of the tropes with David Croft's writing, particularly when writing with Jimmy Perry, was making the audience guess over a possible father-offspring relationship through subtle but plausible hints. Wilson was alleged to be Pike's father in Dad's Army, and Sergeant Major Williams was more or less confirmed to be Gunner Parkin's father in It Ain't Half Hot Mum. Here, though, it's hinted at the beginning that Jack and May's daughter Gloria, played by Lindsay Grimshaw, is in fact Parkin's daughter following the days when May was seeing him behind Jack's back. But 2 episodes into Series 2, that story arc is knocked on the head after it's revealed that Jack, Gloria and May share the same blood. And please, let's not get started on the catchphrases. In other sitcoms, Croft and his writing partners usually wrote stuff that caught on naturally, but here they just feel forced and tiresome. They get so bad that at one point the writers aren't afraid to mock how the audience might feel about them.
Here, that door used to lead to May's kitchen. I papered it over after the war. I expect I could soon undo it again.
Do it in a thrice, could you?
There's no need to take the mickey.
Look, I know I'm not selling this very well at this point, but I'm just trying to get over some of the bad stuff before we get on to the good. So what redeeming features were there about this damp kindling set to canned laughter? Well, for one thing, the production values are excellent. The location shooting was done principally at Arley on the Severn Valley Railway, with Ivet Class 2 number 46521 and a trio of Mark I coaches acting as the only form of traffic on this line. As a backwater setting, Arley and the surrounding countryside look absolutely beautiful. And such setting was only complemented by the production crew. The railway cottages seen in the background shots don't exist in real life, they're just television mock-ups. But even when you look at them close up, they're bloody convincing mock-ups. The studio sets are superbly detailed, the costume design is good, even the writing isn't the absolute worst. I say that with a fine pinch of salt as it's not necessarily the funniest, but credit where it's due, there are some funny scenes, particularly in Series 1, which I'm not allowed to show you because this is YouTube and the BBC still don't understand the difference between copyright infringement and fair use. Thanks for that. One of the most interesting episodes is the Series 1 conclusion Sleeping Around. In this story, Jack receives a letter from British Rail management telling him that his bad leg may force him out of work. It turns out Mr. Parkin alerted the authorities and recommended that Jack's leg is given medical assessment, secretly hoping that Jack will be forced to leave the station and Parkin can have May all for himself. Ethel confronts Parkin about this and, following her usual dottiness, actually gets quite emotional about it afterwards. It shows how passionate she is for her work colleagues when push comes to shove. They're all one big family despite their differences and nothing should tear them apart, especially when the threat of closure is very real. But May, seemingly unflustered by the situation, casually declares that she's nipping away for a bit. The next morning, District Inspector Mr. Orkindale, played by show writer Richard Spendlove, turns up to inspect Jack's leg. Satisfied with what he's seen and praising Jack and May as good people he's known for years, Orkindale then turns to May, who's looking out of a nearby window, and the pair wink at each other. It may not sound very subtle, but once you've sat through the whole thing, you'll understand it a lot more. So there is some intelligent writing there, but it can vary from episode to episode. The most notable highlight, though, is the ensemble cast. Looking at every David Croft comedy, it's always interesting to see where the same old actors keep popping up, with a few surprises here and there. Shane, Holland and Pollard are a nice leading trio, though I'm not entirely sure about the role reversal that some of them play. Shane is generally more interesting and likeable as the well-meaning but sneaky Ted Bovis in Hi-de-Hi, but in Beeching, he works okay. He still gets a few good laughs, and his motivation to protect his wife is understandable. It's clear that he loves her, wants to protect her, and doesn't want to lose her at all costs. Speaking of Jack's wife, Holland's character has a story arc with the love triangle, but apart from that, he is a bit generic. He had more innocence, enthusiasm and vulnerability when he was a yellowcoat at Maplin's, but he pulls off the straight, stiff upper-lips authority figure well enough here. Sue Pollard, on the other hand, plays Sue Pollard. You're either going to love this emotional, eccentric woman, or want to wrap her from head to foot in sellotape so you can get her to sit still and shut up. There are some moments that are hard to sit through, but to her credit, she does throw herself into it and rarely holds back. She's serious when she needs to be and lets her hair down when the time calls for it. So she's a real Marmite character. I'd say come to your own conclusions on her. People say Julia Deakin has done better roles than the stereotypical Northern Lass catering figure that May ends up being, but honestly, it could have been much worse. We could have been lumbered with Sherry Hewson from the pilot episode, who overacts the role way more than Deakin does. Although they don't get many laughs throughout the show, Ivor Roberts and Perry Benson, who play veteran engine driver Arnold and trainee engine driver Ralph, respectively, come across as well invested in their roles. According to Seven Valley volunteers who worked on the production, Benson did drive the Ivor throughout the show, and was apparently pretty good at it, even if his best efforts weren't shown on camera. It's nice to find their scenes were shot on the footplate as well. No studio trickery, no green screening, just plonking a camera in the fireman's seat and calling action. It makes their scenes more genuine, though with some of the stops they did, I'd hate to think what condition the Ivor was in once the film crew had finished with it. And then we have Blakey. Smiler. I'm sorry, but Stephen Lewis just plays the same character in everything he does. Again, he gets a few laughs here and there, including one of the most hilarious build-ups and payoffs in Episode 8, Job Opportunity. And according to Seven Valley volunteers, he seemed to be the nicest member of the cast on set. He has a few decent moments, but his character doesn't seem all that special. And that's probably the best way to describe Oh Dr. Beeching. It has a few decent moments, but it's nothing that special. It's an interesting period piece with a good selection of mild and hilarious laughs and a delightful ensemble cast for sure, but looking at the competition around the mid-90s, unless it was belly-achingly funny with completely original characters and decade-defining moments and catchphrases, there was no way it could have beaten the likes of Father Ted, Absolutely Fabulous or Red Dwarf. The popular culture at that time had put the public off the gentle, family-orientated Dad's Army-style show that Croft was famous for, and wanted something more edgy and original than a toned-down rehash of Hi-de-Hi with hints of Petticoat Junction thrown in. David Croft character comedies were usually much more gentle by nature. But a gentle nature wouldn't result in the show's demise, as much as the way the BBC meddled around with its schedule and then didn't promote it. The first series got by with sufficient ratings on Monday evenings, but the second series was thrown all over the place without really telling anybody. After the first 5 weeks of episodes not being properly scheduled until the very last minute, the show was put on hold to make way for the 1997 World Athletics Championships, before being taken off the air again due to the sudden death of Princess Diana. The return of the Princess of Wales's body to the UK on August the 31st was televised on BBC One in Beeching's evening slot. After that, the final 3 episodes were aired, but there was no indication that these were the last in the series, and following transmission, that was pretty much the end of that. So with all the well-rounded conclusions that David Croft's sitcoms had, like the tribute to Britain's Home Guard, the disbanding and reconciliation of the Royal Artillery Concert Party, the closure of Maplins, the liberation of France, and the fall of the House of Meldrew, how did Dr. Beeching finish up? They had a street party, consumed lots of gassy food, and then this happens. Yet thanks BBC, we get the picture. Honestly, people went nuts about the way Game of Thrones ended, but come on, at least that show had a chance to actually end, even if it was messed up. As a last hurrah for one of the greatest British sitcom producers of all time, Dr. Beeching is a bit of a cliché downer. But as an excuse to gather an all-star TV sitcom cast at a heritage railway for a slot on primetime television, it has enough decent moments and top-end production values to say it was well worth doing. If you're a fan of British comedies, you'll find that this one is nowhere near as funny or groundbreaking as Fawlty Towers, Blackadder or Dad's Army, but if you enjoyed the likes of Heidi High, Keeping Up Appearances and You Rang My Lord, by all means give it a try. See what you think. I'm Chris, and I'm here to gauge the issue.